even at the level of behavioral psychology, which is probably the most superficial version of psychology, free will has already been vitiated by the facts of that we have all been conditioned by past experiences. But if we add on to that all of the observations that have been discovered by or in the field of psychoanalysis, then how much freedom does consciousness have, at least we're talking now ego consciousness, in relation to subconscious drives and the conflicts between different drives? And all of the subconscious fantasies that got input during infancy and childhood, and the influence of the external world. And what about the censor and the fact that there is a constant state of repression of information and of unconscious projection into the field? And I think it's fair to say that if you are in a state where all you are seeing of the other is your own projections on them, you are not really free to relate to what is real. You are relating only to a predetermined set of images that constitute the subconscious belief system of the ego mind. So its freedom is extremely curtailed, even if we just take the psychoanalytic level. But then if we also consider that there are superconscious factors, interventions of inspiration, of ideas, of insights that could not have been willed by the ego, they occur to the ego. And then if we add to it that the ego is itself structured by the family system, which is internalized as a command system, and an internal set of superego figures telling you what you should do and what you shouldn't, and creating emotions of guilt and fear and anxiety and shame, etc., that are not free will choices, then the amount of free will that the ego has is clearly even less than that. And then if we add the fact that things can happen that can trigger a latent psychosis. Now, if someone is in a state, a psychotic state, and that's just a label for a state that everyone is prone to, given a sufficient amount of environmental pressures that produce psychological effects, we have a situation where someone may hear a voice that will be taken as the voice of God telling you to kill somebody, which we remember we were listening to that other video of a psychiatrist who worked with psychotic people with such voices. And when he retired, he had his own psychotic break, but he fortunately could remember enough from his professional days that he took himself to a hospital instead of acting out the murder of a child. But those who don't have that conditioning of professional training, would they have the free will to defy what they took as some divine imperative to commit an act that in another state of consciousness they'd be horrified by? And so if we have an understanding that the ego does not have any control of its structure or of its subconscious, let's say, semi-agential elements because the drives that are embedded in the subconscious are not under the control of the will of the conscious ego, then it becomes very clear that free will is a myth. It's not real. And it's very important that we understand that, because that's just the preliminary analysis that would be given by anyone who had studied these disciplines of psychology and psychoanalysis. One of the problems that the whole, let's say, symbolic field and the culture has today is the fracturing of the academic field into departments that do not communicate with each other. So it's very odd even that one could be a cranium cutter without understanding psychology or psychoanalysis, and be free, be licensed to mutilate people's bodies without any idea of what you are really doing and the effects or the function of a brain or of the nervous system, etc., and the relationship to consciousness. But then if we add to that our understanding that consciousness is not only a mind that is outside of the brain and outside of your body. Your ego is not in your body. The appearance that there is consciousness in the body is what an analyst, a psychoanalyst, would call a projective identification. But as Sri Ramana and all the sages of the yogic and the Eastern spiritual traditions have made very clear, the consciousness is not either in the body or even in the dimension of the physical. But the physical, all that appears, is an appearance within consciousness. And so if we really understand that everything that appears, that your split mind, it's not a split brain by cutting the corpus callosum, but it's a split mind, split into subject and object duality. All that it can see, it projects as being outside of itself. And it imagines that itself is inside the body because of the sensory data of the body. But this is a delusion. And even this brain cutter was aware of that. But all the physics is becoming aware of that in general. We saw that Federico Fagin, who had that extraordinary experience and recognized that the intelligence is in the field, the morphogenic field, as Sheldrake has written and experimented with for so long, and many, many others. And so once we understand that, and we begin to recognize that there is one consciousness that determines everything that appears in what is mistaken for a world, but is not outside consciousness, but is more like a dream that the consciousness is having. But because of that, the only free will is in the dreamer, not in the consciousnesses who are being dreamed. They have no agency whatsoever, no will at all. And that's an extremely important point. And it's a point made by all of the traditions, and it's a doctrine that in Sanskrit let's see. It's a doctrine called Paripurna Ek Atmaya. Give you that back. That's the basis of all of the traditional yogas, whether it's Buddhist or Taoist or Vedic or Shaivite. What does that mean? Purna, you understand, is full, is complete. To add the paripurna means that, and it means it's total, it's absolute, it's perfect, it's without exception, a single ek means one, a single self, atma. So all of this, all of what you might think of as an us, or a them, or a cosmos, all of it is a single consciousness dreaming, at play within itself. And that consciousness indeed has free will. But that consciousness is the only being with the power of will. And it wills the existence of the universe, but existing only as a dream within itself. And when that self chooses to awaken, the world disappears. In the same way that when you go into deep sleep at night, the world disappears. Because it was only a dream within a dream. And so the ego has no free will, even to determine when it goes into deep sleep. It usually won't do it at night, but it'll do it the moment you start meditating. But you don't have free will. You don't have control over your mind. We've been practicing having a silent mind. Do you have the power to will your mind to stay silent? It's not very common because you can't do it. It's impossible. It's really important that you get it. That you have no free will over anything that you think you have decided to do. That will, we could say its proximate cause was the conditioning of the past and the superego voices and the fantasies, etc. Yes, but even that proximate cause that you could say would work in a law court, it does not have any reality outside of the consciousness that's dreaming all of those factors that the individual mind mistakenly believes are the reasons for its actions or its reactions. You know, this is even known in law. I remember back in law school when you had to take the first course in criminal law, and the first concept was that of mens rea, okay, which is Latin for an evil mind. If you did not have, and if the prosecutor could not prove criminal intention by the person who did an act that was technically considered a crime, they were innocent. And so it's a very famous type of verdict to say one is innocent by reason of insanity, even temporary insanity. You'd get off scot-free in the law. Well, you might have to go to an insane asylum instead of a prison, but you would not be guilty. So it's very important to recognize that even the law sees that, no, you can be in a state without any free will. But the truth is the lawyers, the judges, none of them have any free will. It's all frozen. It's all determined at a higher level of consciousness that transcends any individual node of consciousness that is an appearance of a dreamer within the dream, as like those nested Russian dolls. The consciousness of the ego is entirely subordinate to the higher levels of consciousness, but all of those higher levels are subordinate to the absolute one self. And that total, complete, absolute oneness is the truth, is the real.